people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Yesterday's WBC interim title fight in the women's minimum weight division between unbeaten Sarah Bormann versus then unbeaten Janibek Bustillos. And the fight worked out exactly as I predicted. Janibek, being a capable fighter, she'd be able to put up a fight, but she wouldn't be able to win it.
She gave the first round to Janibek Bustillos behind the cleaner work. Lots of pressure from Sarah Bormann, who was coming forward behind a guard.
Tight guard standing in a slight crouch, inching forward, trying to get within striking distance of Janibek Bustillos, who was moving and punching.
Being busy, I gave Janibek Bustillos the first round, but in the second,
she was already starting to wilt under the constant pressure from Sarah Bormann, who was not discouraged, not deterred, kept coming forward, kept getting punches in there. I gave the second round to Sarah Bormann.
She was taking over.
I gave the second round to Sarah Bormann, the third round to Sarah Bormann, who was busier, catching and shooting behind that guard, countering.
Catch and counter left hook.
Backing off Janibek Bustillos with educated pressure and clean punches. This is where Sarah Bormann's experience in volume punching ended up taking over. I gave Sarah the third round, Sarah the fourth round.
She just nicked it for me.
Bustillos was a little busier in the fourth than she was in the third.
Yeah.
But whenever she'd get a bit of momentum going, that catch and counter left hook would simmer her down. It was a bit of a game changer. An important punch in this fight for Sarah Bormann.
Was consistently catching Janibek Bustillos between the punches.
Say that after 5 rounds I had it either 4-1 to Sarah Bormann or 3-2 to Sarah Bormann.
Sarah was up.
I gave the 6th round to Sarah Bormann behind the constant pressure and clean punching.
She started sweeping the rounds, and it's not that Janibek Bustillos wasn't putting up a fight. It's not that she wasn't fighting back. It's that her wider shots.
Her shots were wider than Sarah Bormann's.
Yeah.
Sarah's punches were shorter and straighter, and Sarah was catching Janibek in between the shots, in between the punches, constantly backing her off.
Gave Sarah the 6th round and the 7th.
Janibek Bustillos had gotten off to a good start in that round, but Sarah Bormann was able to steal it from her by landing big.
Towards the end.
I gave Sarah Bormann the 8th round. She got off to a good start in the round and was able to maintain that momentum throughout the entirety of it. Open scoring in Germany had already had Sarah in the lead after 8.
9th round looked like a swing round to me because Bustillos was very busy at the start, though not very accurate.
A lot of her shots were getting blocked, even though she was busier than Sarah Bormann. It was Sarah's punches that were finding a home, so it was a quality over quantity kind of round.
What do you like? Do you like Janibek Bustillos' volume, or do you like Sarah Bormann's accuracy?
9th round looked like a swing round to me, though you could have swung it to Janibek Bustillos. I had Sarah Bormann stealing the 10th from Bustillos, who got off to a good start but faded in the middle and started getting hammered by the German.
Story of the fight was Sarah Bormann marching forward behind a guard, catching and shooting, catching Janibek Bustillos in between the punches because Janibek's punches were a lot wider than Sarah's. So even though she was letting her hands go,
she was still getting pushed around, she was still getting caught, she put up a decent fight, and to the eye, she looked like she was the more heavy-handed puncher of the two, not the more accurate puncher.
that was Sarah.
Sarah Bormann, the mid-range to inside pressure fighter that showed good defense whilst coming forward, whilst on the attack.
She was defensible.
Which made all the difference. She was able to mitigate how much damage she received, how many punches got in whilst being on the attack.
Swept most of the rounds. I could only really give Janibek Bustillos maybe 2-3 rounds, 2 or 3 the max.
4 if you're generous. It was a valiant effort from Janibek Bustillos, but I think experience is what won Sarah Bormann this fight. Sarah Bormann, who is now the mandatory challenger to Senicia Estrada by way of the WBC, and as stated before the fight, I'm not sure that a fight between Senicia and Sarah is going to happen because Senicia Estrada may be very close to leaving the women's minimum weight division and vacating the titles that she holds there. Her very next fight may end up being at light flyweight.
Upstairs at light flyweight, opposite the ring, unified champion Jessica Neri Plata.
People over there at Top Rank on Sinisia's behalf already reportedly made an offer to the only other champion at this weight, Yo Castavalle, and it doesn't look like things have worked out. Sinisia's not going to let that stop her and stifle her momentum. If she's got to move upstairs,
She's not going to waste any time.
she may very well leave the women's minimum weight division in her very next fight. Thus, I don't get the sense we're going to see Bormann versus Estrada. But what might happen is Sarah might either go on to be elevated to full champion or end up fighting somebody for the newly vacated title, provided that Sinisia vacates it, and she might.
When she does, maybe the WBC will elect to elevate Sarah to full champion status, or maybe they'll let her fight somebody for the newly vacated title. Either scenario is possible.
Maybe, but I don't anticipate these two are going to fight. Congratulations to Sarah Bormann for staying in character and living up to my expectations. One of the better fighters.
One of the better fighters in the women's minimum weight division today.
A fighter that could soon see themselves become a champion. In the men's middleweight division, we saw reigning defending WBO champion Janibek make short work of Canada's own Stephen Butler, and that's what I told you would happen. It's not a fight you need to spend a lot of time on. Stephen Butler steps up to get put down.
What usually happens, God bless him.
But that's how it usually goes. The fight only lasted 2 rounds. First round was a feel-out round where not a lot happened.
So if you were familiar with the fighters, you could tell what was about to. You could tell what was about to happen and what direction this fight was going. The problem with Stephen Butler is he ain't got the durability to take the shots.
He ain't got the defense and movement to stay out of the way of them. He's gonna get hit at this level. Guy's got a bit of a glass jaw. He got dropped 3 times.
3 times in the second round, though I felt that referee Jack Reese could have waved it off after the first knockdown because this guy's legs weren't under him.
Stephen Butler would rise to his feet after being dropped. Jack Reese would give him a look, see if he wants to allow the contest to go on, and for some reason,
He did.
Stephen had noodle legs.
Never actually recovered from the first knockdown.
Took more punishment than he needed to. This was a return to a more aggressive, a more effective Janibek than the one that shared the ring with Denzel Bentley.
Couldn't do to Denzel Bentley what he did to Stephen Butler.
Though at last night's performance, he has put distance between himself and that one, and that fight, that performance. Janibek because this fight only lasted 2 rounds, should get back out there in a jiffy.
I don't see why not. If he can't land a high-profile fight with a high-profile opponent, the best thing he can do is stay busy, stay active, and rack up more knockouts.
Leading up to this fight, we saw him state that he wants Erislandy Lara, this division's newly crowned WBA champion. He wants Jermall Charlo, WBC champion. He's not going to get those fights.
We all know it.
People over there at Top Rank are in the process of finalizing a fight between Esquiva Falcao and some other fighter for what is the IBF title. And the sooner they do that, the sooner they can get the winner of that fight in the ring with Janibek presumably towards the end of this year in the mean in between time, because this fight only lasted 2 rounds. Get Janibek back out there.
Why not?
Against another Stephen Butler kind of guy on the premise that options are scarce. You're not going to get the kids on the other side of the street to play with Janibek.
You're not.
You can't get him a Lara fight. You can't get him a Charlo fight.
But what you can get him is a bit of notoriety by allowing him to get out there and do what he does best.
Some years ago, Gennady Golovkin was having the same problem that Janibek is having. He couldn't land a high-profile opponent to save his life, but his activity.
Because he was fighting so often, and every time he did fight, he destroyed his opponents.
That's what helped him reach some accord in the public eye, that he was consistently going in there, trashing guys. You didn't have to wait too long between Golovkin fights to see him in action. His countryman, Janibek should follow a similar strategy.
Some think he's the second coming of Gennady Golovkin.
So whatever he is, he needs to stay busy, he needs to stay active. Inactivity kills careers.
Erislandy Lara has been averaging something like 1 fight, just 1 fight per year for the last 2 or 3 years. And Jermall Charlo, he hasn't fought at all.
Jermall hasn't fought at all in the last 2. How do you imagine that's helping his notoriety along, his profile, his career, that they haven't seen this boxer box in the last 2 years, roughly 2?
2 next month.
And these are the fighters that pass for quote-unquote big names in the men's middleweight division. Sparsely active fighters.
Inactive champions.
Save a few peculiar individuals online. Nobody's checking for either Jermall Charlo or Erislandy Lara. They're dwindling fan base.
For Janibek to usurp them and potentially become this division's money man, all he needs to do is get the fans on his side.
How does he do that?
Do what the other guys aren't doing. Keep fighting, keep punching, and do it often as you can. I don't imagine Top Rank has to break the bank to make fights for Janibek.
I don't imagine they broke the bank making yesterday's fight, a fight with Janibek and Stephen Butler.
Give me a break.
I don't imagine it's as expensive to make a Janibek Alimkhanulai fight as it might be to make a Devin Haney fight or a Shakur Stevenson fight. I don't think Janibek here today is making the same money that those fighters are making, which makes his fights more cost feasible.
Since it's cheaper, do it more often.
We then come to the PBC card, the PBC show, the 140-pound WBA title fight between Rolly Romero and Ishmael Barroso for what was the newly vacated WBA title. Initially, I wasn't even going to watch this fight.
Because it was happening at the same time as the Janibek versus Butler fight on ESPN.
Like I said in my previous segment, that fight ended so abruptly, it only lasted 2 rounds, that I figured, okay, I'll tune into the Romero fight.
While I'm here.
It was disgusting what we had to take in. Disgusting what I saw. That Rolly Romero was even in the running for a WBA title fight at 140 pounds, having done absolutely nothing since being knocked out by Gervonta Davis at lightweight. He's afforded a title shot at super lightweight.
To some degree, there's always angling in the sport of boxing, but the angling you get by way of the PBC is a lot more brazen, a lot more blatant.
Sometimes I'm watching their cards, and it almost feels like I'm not watching a boxing match because of how preordained everything is. It feels more like you're taking in a WWE show.
It doesn't feel like a sport with the PBC.
The way everything is packaged, how lopsided everything is, or everything turns out to be. It almost feels like it's not a sport, it's not a boxing match.
You know exactly what this guy's here for. He's here to lose, and you know exactly who the promotion is behind. The promotion is behind Rolly Romero.
In the build-up of this fight, I stated quite plainly several times that this was all about putting a title in Rolly's hands to set the stage for a Gervonta Davis rematch, because without that belt, there's no reason to do it. The guy got stopped in 6 rounds.
Why run it back?
This was all about putting a title in Rolly's hands by any means necessary, even if it meant...
That has to be one of the worst stoppages I've seen in years. One of the worst stoppages I've seen in recent memory.
Veteran promoter Lou DiBella described it as shit. Fugazi, quote-unquote title fight in the first place, shit performance by the guy set up to win, shit inexplicable stoppage to guarantee the win. There's no champion in that ring.
Nobody's gonna accept Rolly Romero as the genuine article, as a bona fide champion, because we all know what we saw. He was down on all 3 of the judges' scorecards. He had been knocked down
Early in the fight.
and while he went on to record a quote-unquote knockdown of his own later on, we all know what we saw. He didn't knock Ishmael down, he pushed him down, and Tony Weeks allowed it.
Tony Weeks, who in the eyes of many, stopped this fight for no good reason. Tony Weeks, who stopped this fight prematurely. Trainer Kevin Cunningham stated Rolly was losing the fight. He pushed Barroso down, and Weeks calls it a knockdown. Barroso scored the more significant punches in the last exchange.
Yeah.
Weeks jumps in.
Stops the fight.
I've been involved in this sport for over 30 years, and this was downright criminal. There's no other way to describe it. This was a fight that Ishmael was so clearly winning, even if that's not what the matchmakers and the higher-ups intended. That's what was happening, and Tony Weeks bailed.
He bailed Rolly Romero out by stopping the fight.
He had no choice. We all know this was about putting that WBA title in Rolly Romero's hands by any means necessary, but Rolly was down on the cards. Immediately after the fight, Showtime released a poll asking, do you agree with the stoppage?
Sample size poll of 9,000, close to 10,000 people, 94% of which voted no. They don't agree with the stoppage.
Why would they? In that final exchange before Tony Weeks waved it off, Rolly didn't even land any punches.
Majority of the fight, all the meaningful shots and all the meaningful punches were coming from Ishmael Barroso, who we all knew ahead of time. They brought this guy in there to lose, but he had an unpleasant surprise for Rolly Romero. He wasn't there to lay down. He wasn't there to lose, and you found that out early.
He came to win. This 40-year-old unheralded fighter was proving to be too much for Rolly Romero, because that's how terrible a boxer he is. This is how much smoke and how many mirrors you need to promote a fighter like Rolly Romero, who already got a gift once before against Jackson Mariñez.
I didn't forget.
They are outright waving off fights at this point. to preserve this guy's record and keep him in the winner's bracket.
PBC is a joke.
Their packaging, their presentation, and many of their fighters. The PBC is a fucking joke.
A bad joke.
It's bad enough that they're giving a guy like Rolly a title shot. Rolly, who had done absolutely nothing since being knocked out by Gervonta Davis at lightweight in just 6 rounds. That gets you a title shot.
His first fight at 140.
What a travesty it is to all those fighters ranked by the WBA, all those contenders in the 140-pound division, fighting in fights to earn a rank, a one-day fight for an alphabet title just for Rolly to get to skip ahead of them in the queue.
Why?
They just want to put a title in his hands so that Gervonta Davis can come along and take it from him.
I think they set up Alberto Puello. I think they set him up.
It's not a coincidence that ahead of this fight, 1 week out from it, this guy tests positive for a banned substance right on time for an older fighter, a much older fighter, to stand in his place. They did everything they could to put that title in Rolly Romero's hands, and even that was not enough.
Because he was losing. He was down on all 3 judges' scorecards.
Let's talk about what we saw. I gave the first round to Rolly Romero, I did, though it became evident in that first round that Rolly didn't want to sit in the pocket with Ishmael. Ishmael was getting off short body shots, short punches, mid-range to inside, whenever he was within striking distance of Rolly.
He felt those shots.
You could see that there was something on those punches, and you could see that Rolly Romero didn't like it, which is why he started shuffling and staying on the perimeter of the ring as Ishmael Barroso closed in, fighting out of the southpaw stance, leading with his right to set up his left.
Set up his backhand.
There was a conscious effort from Ishmael early on to touch Rolly to the body. He consistently kept going there. Rolly didn't like it, which is likely why Ishmael was able to get off that big backhand that dropped Rolly.
He had become so mindful of Ishmael's body punches that he started dropping his hands to protect his midsection, and just like that, Ishmael was able to get in with a big straight left hand.
Upstairs instead of down, as Rolly Romero was giving up ground, trying to stay out of the pocket.
It didn't take Ishmael Barroso long to hold the center of the ring and back Rolly Romero off, get him beating those feet.
He spent the majority of this fight stalking Rolly Romero, who couldn't dominate the pocket, couldn't hold the center of the ring, and couldn't keep Ishmael out. He did score a quote-unquote knockdown, which really was more of a pushdown, but Tony Weeks allowed it.
And in the night,
both guys are letting their hands go, more or less. Both guys aren't exchanging, but Rolly's punches aren't actually landing. They're not finding a home. He's not doing any damage to Ishmael Barroso, and just like that, Tony Weeks stops it. He jumps in, he waves it off, the rest is history. At a time when it was Ishmael who was up on the cards.
All 3 judges' scorecards after 9.
These are the lengths the people at the PBC have to go to try and convince you that Rolly Romero is some kind of boxer, some kind of good fighter, when all this is really about is making Gervonta Davis beating him mean something.
It means nothing. He's terrible.
He robbed Jackson Marinez last night. He robbed Ishmael Barroso, and beating him
doesn't mean a goddamn thing. It didn't mean nothing at 135, and it won't mean nothing at 140.
As stated, whenever I'm watching a PBC show, if I'm actually watching one, it almost feels like I'm not watching a boxing match because of how preordained everything is and how obvious they make it.
It's more WWE than boxing.
Though I knew ahead of time what this was all about. This was all about putting a title in Rolly Romero's hands by any means necessary.
So here we are.